We don't have an actual break between our two partnership sessions, but as the table is getting reset and our next group of people is coming up on stage, I'm Terry DeVoe from IMLS and wanted to take a quick opportunity to tell you about another partnership that IMLS has been working on over the last 6 months. It's a joint funding opportunity known as Performance Partnership Pilots, and it's designed to better serve disconnected youth who are ages 14 through 24. IMLS, together with several other federal funding agencies, including the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Corporation for National and Community Service, issued the first notice inviting applications last November for this initiative called P3. And we are now in the process of selecting up to 10 groups of partners who will work together to blend existing federal funds that they receive and to better serve youth through educational and employment programs. And for this, they are also receiving startup grants of up to $700,000. The idea is to test whether additional flexibility in the federal programmatic and reporting requirement realm can lead to better outcomes, ultimately, for this target population. P3 is intended to break down silos at the local, state, tribal, federal levels, and to better integrate disparate services that you heard talked about up here for this target audience. And as we wait to announce this year's pilots, I can tell you that work is in progress for another round of P3, and that we expect another notice inviting applications to come out sometime in fall. So if you are a library system, a community group that is somehow already working with local, tribal, state partners, especially to serve this population of disconnected youth, then we encourage you to watch for these P3 announcements and to consider applying with your partners. And our contact information for IMLS has been on the roster, so feel free to get in touch with any of us and we can tell you more. Now I will turn it over to our panel.
Thank you. And thank you, Terry, for talking about P3. It's an interesting way to start off our panel on federal partnerships because it is a great example of federal partnerships. Work across many agencies to coordinate a notice in the Federal Register. You have no idea how hard that is. But one of our panelists is going to talk to us about how hard that is and what it might mean on the ground. So good afternoon. I'm Heidi Silver-Paquilla. I'm from the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. I work in the Division of Adult Education and Literacy, and so the people that we serve in my division are those families, the adults in the families that we've been talking about all day. It's great to go in the afternoon after so many wonderful examples of partnerships and innovative practices have already been shared to give inspiration to our talking points this afternoon. Adult education last year served 1.7 million students. About 40% of them are adults who are taking English classes and helping adults transition to meet their high school equivalency requirement or to transition on to post-secondary education, training, or workplace, or advance in their workplace. And we're proud to serve these students, but we know that we are not meeting the need. We are so not meeting the need. The OECD Survey of Adult Skills that came out in 2013 estimates that there are 36 million adults with low literacy skills and 48 million with low numeracy skills. So that gap between 1.7 and 36 million, that's pretty large. We released a report in February called Making Skills Everyone's Business, a call to transform adult learning in the United States. Large title. And it lays out 7 strategies for bridging the gap between the 1.7 and the 36 million need. And however you slice that need, it's still a large number. So partnerships, alliances, cooperative ventures, collective impact, all of those kinds of types of work are the first strategy that really underlies all the other strategies in making skills everyone's business. It's the key to stretching resources and bringing learning to busy adults in ways that is convenient, relevant, contextualized, and challenging. You know, adults want to be challenged if they're going to put their time into something. So we've heard today about so many examples of how libraries are the strategic partner for others to meet their goals, and that's what this panel is going to talk about as well. Our title is called Federal Partnerships, but we're not all federals on the panel, and we're going to be hearing from others' perspectives of how they have used federal dollars and some of the lessons they have learned. And in preparation for my talk, I thought of some things that make a successful partnership and things that nurture partnerships, but these are ideas that have all come out already today. Number one is you start with the personal. Just at the federal level is just the same as at the state level, is just the same as at the local level. You have to reach out, you have to make personal relationships, and you have to start building that relationship of trust so that you can start sharing intentions, pressures, deadlines. Maura's talking about working with the White House. Let me tell you about pressure and deadlines, right? And so if you can share that and understand what your partner is working with, you can sustain through the tough times of getting your work to align and to start to find areas of overlap where your work becomes the way that your partner meets its mission, right? And vice versa. That's the goal, is that we're all meeting our missions, and in many cases, as we've spoken about today, our missions are very much the same, and that's the way it can be sustainable. So, and to sustain beyond the grant, as we talked about earlier, such a great point. So, as our panelists speak, I want to ask them to share their innovative approaches that they've used so that others in the field can replicate that. Like to hear about how federal partnerships have filtered down to the state level, to the local level, and how that has resulted in leverage of extra dollars or leverage of extra ways to serve the population. And I'm especially interested in how federal partnerships can be made visible at the local level. Do people coming in your library understand that you're working with USCIS? What those letters mean? Do people understand that you're working with the Department of Education and what our acronyms and our alphabet soup means? Do they understand you're working with the Treasury or with tell me your Doris, CFPB, the Consumer Protection Bureau? All of these federal initiatives get kind of washed away as we make cute names and bring those names down to the local level. But does that really help it expose to your community members? Do they know how their federal dollars are working and how their state dollars are working? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my panelists, and I'm joined today by Steve Reeder, who is a professor in the Department of Applied Linguistics at Portland State University, and so much more. I've been working with Steve for many years, very happily. Jamie Markus, who is at the development manager at the Wyoming State Library and a White House champion of change, so I hope you talk to us about that. And Denise Tomback, who's division chief at the Workforce Investment, Employment, and Training Administration Region 6 in San Francisco. She's part of the U.S. Department of Labor. So all these long federal titles, right? So, Steve, we'll start with you.
And I don't have a long federal title. Thank you, Heidi, and thank you all for this event. Thanks, IMLS. I think what I want to do is talk very quickly about my experience working with federal partners on digital literacy development in different ways over the years. And then I want to try to come back very quickly and talk about lessons I've seen people learning about partnerships in that process. So this all started a number of years ago when we were fortunate enough in the Literacy, Language, and Technology Research Group to receive an IMLS NLG grant to develop a platform designed to be a tool for partnerships to support learning and development in economically vulnerable adults. That was called LearnerWeb. And I see that in retrospect as a seed for partnership development, because the key piece of LearnerWeb is that it has roles to blend for both face-to-face support of adults as well as technology support. And it allows community partners to adjust that blend and the way it's implemented, and I'll come back to that. So we developed that with partners across the country. And one of the things we found out trying to use it with economically vulnerable adults, you won't be surprised to hear this, is it was very difficult for many economically vulnerable adults to use technology. Many of them lacked what we might call digital literacy abilities to work comfortably with technology. So as the Great Recession started unfolding, and there were more and more adults finding themselves in economically vulnerable positions, we applied for a Department of Commerce grant called BTOP, Broadband Technology Opportunities Program, with a national network of partners in 6 states, each of whom had an array of their selected local partners. And we kind of were, like an airplane. We were traveling together in loose configuration with an awful lot of moving parts. And unlike an airplane, we weren't entirely sure how we were going to do this. And the implementations in each state, in each locale, had to figure out really how to do the work. We gave them a tool that we had developed and some content that we had developed, and we were trying to help them learn how to become digitally literate for whatever purposes they had, work, family support, or whatever. And a very important characteristic of that project was the fact that people were free in the space they were operating in to innovate and to implement, to fail, and to be successful, and learn over time how to do that. And that's a very important point, I think. That was very appropriate. Fortunately, the ERA funding allowed that type of grant to happen with lots of variations in local implementation. And overall, from my perspective, it was very successful. We trained over 800 volunteers and 13,000 adult learners in about 120 computer labs, each of which self-designed. And they looked very different. And they used different community partners. Libraries had different roles in those partnerships. 3 minutes, oh boy. They ranged from a small Baptist church in Treme, the original African-American community in New Orleans, to a large one-stop in Minneapolis, to a library literacy program in Richmond, California. And there was just a wide range of flavors and outcomes. IMLS awarded us a research grant that's nearing conclusion now that looked at the very large set of system data and observations on the ground about both how volunteer tutors and learners proceeded and became digitally literate in these different contexts. And I also wanted to mention, when I'm talking about digital literacy, something Heidi mentioned a moment ago, which was the PIAC grant that's right in the center of adult education policy development, as Heidi was saying. But that was unfortunately created in a vacuum of effective partnerships, from my perspective, because there's no information in that national and international database about library users or library use. Wouldn't that be nice to have had a question? And I think it wasn't there probably because the right partnerships weren't in place at the time that that instrument was developed. So we applied for a research grant jointly with Multnomah County Library in Portland that IMLS awarded last fall to actually go out and look at outreach populations that Multnomah County Library is trying to reach, use the PIAC assessment tool to see what the digital literacy and problem-solving skills of the population are, and to try to map those onto the skills that people need to be able to use information technology offered by the library. So that's a way a partnership is going to try to fill a vacuum that's, I think, very important. So very quickly, the lessons learned from all of this, and I'm sorry I had to go through it so quickly, are innovation really needs to have an appropriate operational space to develop. Collaboration and partnership mean different things to different types of organizations. We saw this over and over again. They mean different things to library culture than they do to employment and training culture, than they do to adult education culture or social service agency culture. And it's really important to keep those differences in mind and work with them as constructive opportunities. And finally, it's really important in our work to position everyone, all the partners, as learners. It's not just the end user who needs to learn in order for this work to be successful. Everyone needs to be positioned as a learner, particularly with respect to the new technologies being used. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. Jamie.
Okay. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, everyone. My name is Jamie Markus, and I'm the Library Development Manager and Library Services and Technology Act Coordinator for the great state of Wyoming. I've been involved in state libraries and state federal partnerships for over 10 years now. And in fact, this last October, I was named a Champion of Change by the White House for promoting libraries as essential partners in the Affordable Care Act outreach. But today, I really want to speak on the role that state libraries can have really as connectors for these federal partnerships. State libraries are in a unique role in terms of library partnership opportunities. On one hand, we are the state-level partners for many organizations, BTOP, IMLS, grants to states, Laura Bush 21st Century grants, National Leadership grants, and even a few of the grants on the museum side of IMLS's portfolio. You will see libraries and state libraries as key stakeholders and partners in those opportunities. And don't even get me started on E-rate, some of those wonderful Bill and Melinda Gates grants that are still trickling. There's money available every now and then, MacArthur grants, and any of the other grants that we've heard about this morning, and the Department of Education and other partner organizations that are here. State libraries often form one of those first-line partnerships for those organizations. However, I would say that state libraries' strongest role can be, and it really is for many state libraries, is that whenever we act as informed intermediaries for these federal and local partnership opportunities. I say informed intermediaries because state library agencies can both promote federal projects to libraries in our area, but then we can also promote the use of libraries to those federal projects and those other entities that are out there seeking to do activities, seeking to disseminate information within our areas. And state libraries are generally the experts on the libraries in their states. For example, here a couple years ago when the Institute of Museum and Library Services put a call out to state libraries to do whatever it is we could do to help push information out to the public about the rollout of the Affordable Care Act, we in Wyoming did a couple of different things. First and foremost, we did some training for libraries in our state to train the library staff so that they kind of had the broad strokes and kind of knew that the Affordable Care Act was rolling out and what kinds of questions they would receive from the public, what sorts of tools, websites, references that they could use to answer those questions. We also put together a couple handouts that those local libraries could then give to those patrons who had those questions. And in that sense, we help the library become the partner and do the actual activities. And many libraries in Wyoming, and I know across the U.S., did varying forms of outreach activities just depending on their locale, the neighborhood, the folks that they serve in their state and area. But state libraries help prompt some of those activities. And then on the other hand, I worked with the Department of Health and Human Services, Region 8, which is out of Denver, and they held weekly teleconferences and other trainings with various stakeholders who were also putting out information on the Affordable Care Act, and I went to every one of their teleconferences, even though many of those were for insurance providers, insurance sellers, and then I also found other teleconferences or other in-person meetings, AARP, for healthcare workers. And then whenever grants were finally awarded and there were healthcare navigators on board, I made sure to talk to them as much as possible to disseminate one key piece of information, and that is remember libraries. And remember that public libraries exist in nearly every location of any size, or there are bookmobiles or branches. We are everywhere. Most public libraries have some sort of community meeting room. They have some sort of public internet or technology that's available to anybody, especially these outside partner organizations, to use, and that free Wi-Fi is a godsend. And I also told these organizations the key fact that I think we all know and remember, that for the most part, libraries are thought of as safe places to go to get your information. Especially for something as interesting as the Affordable Care Act. And so those partner organizations then hopefully, and I know they did at least in Wyoming, they remembered to use the library and started holding a lot of their outreach events in the library's community rooms, and then started partnering with the libraries. And in many cases, this was not an entity that was on their radar as much as we all would have loved it to be, the first thought in their minds. So, and I would say that Wyoming is not alone in what we do. In fact, I know that there are, at least 4 chiefs here in the room, state librarians, and a few other library development managers. And we have staff in every state library whose sole job is to provide that background and, for libraries in their state, and to be able to do the outreach and connect the libraries to projects that would make the most sense. And I would actually say, if you want to have some fun, go ahead and ask any of these chiefs about any one of your projects, one of your partnership opportunities, and I bet they can tell you at least 2 library systems that would love to be a partner in that project, and they can tell you 2 who would say they would love to be a partner but will never do anything about it. Because state libraries, we know our libraries, and without a doubt, I can tell you right now in Wyoming, for any of these projects, who your best partners are going to be. And in fact, I can probably come pretty close by telling you exactly which activities they're going to participate in and how, what kind of outputs you're going to see from partnering with them. And that goes nationwide. So I guess really in closing, I just want to remind everybody that state libraries really are excellent connectors for partnership opportunities, because again, we can both connect libraries to the project and the project to the library. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. This is why you need to know the people, right? Because the people know what's going on. So it's a great example of my first point, right, is make the personal connection with your state librarian so you know where you're going to get a good toehold. Thank you. Denise, looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Is this on?
Should be.
Okay. You can tell I don't use mics a lot. As Heidi indicated, my name is Denise Tomback. I'm out of the San Francisco Regional Office of the Employment and Training Administration of the Department of Labor. Is that my 6 minutes? Okay. I was asked to come today to share a little bit or talk to you a little bit about the new law passed last July, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or the Opportunity Act. We couldn't come up with a good acronym with WIOA, so we've just been calling it the Opportunity Act in the office. But talk a little bit about how the library system can be a partner, or actually continue to be a partner, and maybe that you weren't aware or you weren't involved under the old law, the Workforce Investment Act. So it was expanded under the Opportunity Act. So what I'd like to do a little bit, and just to back up a little bit, the Employment and Training Administration, for those of you that don't know, We receive the money from Congress that's allotted and allocated from Congress for the formula grants, primarily the formula grants that the states receive, the states and territories receive for employment and training services and activities. States receive it, and then it's based by formula down to the local areas. So that's how it gets down to your community from Congress on down. Even the Workforce Investment Act of 1998, that was only supposed to last for a couple years, but Congress just extended it for almost 10. It also had the partnerships in it, and it required a seamless service and partners through the one-stop system. Does anyone have association with the one-stop systems now? Couple? Okay. Well, maybe when I'm done, you'll look up your local area and maybe start to develop a little better partnership. And this did include the libraries, but it wasn't really enforced, and it just kind of sat there and went on. The nice thing with the Opportunity Act is it substantially changes the focus from the Workforce Investment Act. It requires a lot more partnership, and it builds on the partnerships, and it returns let's say, the more control, the more service design, what's needed to the communities, to the local areas. Things are not necessarily happening at the state as much as they were under the Investment Act. So what I'd like to do is kind of start a little bit high level, the Opportunity Act itself, and work my way down to the local area, and then where I'm hoping, when I'm done, that you'll see the connection with the library system. So the Opportunity Act itself, it's focusing on the evolving nature of the workforce and the economic needs. It's moving, as I said, that responsibility to the local areas to have their pulse, to have their finger on the pulse of what's going on with workforce development, with employers, with the community at large. It replaces the limitations in training, funding, and service delivery design. So there isn't the strict confines on what can be trained. There aren't the strict confines of what the funding is per program. There's more flexibility in moving the money around for where it's needed in a community. And the service delivery design is different. There isn't where they must go look for a job, and then maybe they qualify for case management, and then maybe they can get to training. The new law took that away. If somebody walks in and they need training, they're going to go to training. It aligns workforce, education, and economic development. It responds to economic and labor market challenges. Oh, wow, okay. It allows for increased flexibility and requires regional collaboration. This is where I'm saying again, it brings it down to the local area, those that know what's going on in the community. That's what the law did. Now, in the way the money comes down with the law, there's each state has a state workforce development board. They are like the overseers. They have oversight on the local workforce development boards. But it's the local workforce development boards who are actually developing the strategies and implementing, securing the one-stop operators, selecting providers. That's happening now at the ground level more. The local workforce development board, and just to give you a sense, California has 49 of them. Nevada has 2. Alaska doesn't have any. They just have the state. I don't know if you know what Wyoming has, but 1. And I think Portland's up to 12 now. So it really varies. And California used to have 52. We got them to cut it down just a little bit. But anyway, when I talk about the local workforce development board and their responsibilities, they are to serve business and seekers collaboratively, increasing the opportunities for the most in need. So when I heard earlier today where it's those most in needs that the library is reaching out to or that are coming into the library, this is a great way for you to connect them with the literacy skills or the training that they need with these Opportunity Act dollars. It's also to assess the services that are being provided to those with barriers for job training and education so that they can secure that job. They might be able to secure that credential. I think I need to move a little faster. oh my goodness. Okay, the Local Workforce Development Board, I didn't think I wrote that much. Okay, so let's get down to where it gets down to you all. Yeah, no, you've heard enough of that. They select the one-stop operator. They're looking at labor market information for skills training. They're identifying training providers, which the library system can be a training provider. They're coordinating with educational providers, and they have the flexibility for training option. So I know I said those really fast, but with those roles, this is how it would highlight, and this is how it would connect with the library systems, because by law, the library system can be an eligible provider of training. It can be a one-stop partner. Now, I'll tell you there's cost involved, but you can be a one-stop partner. You can also receive statewide funds. When we provide money down to states, there's a pot that the governor can reserve. It's called statewide. He likes to call it the governor's reserve, but it's actually statewide reserve. You're also, the library system is eligible for those statewide funds. So what I've seen, and I kind of did a poll in our states, and we have 8 states in Region 6. What still seems to be going on are more job search activities. Helping someone get on a computer to access a job bank, helping them with their resume, helping them connect to a workshop. But what I'm seeing, too, in talking to some is that it's growing. There's more grant partnerships going on. Idaho specifically has instituted, they received, I heard it earlier, the Gates. They had received a Gates grant, and they're working with the One Stop for Service Delivery. They just received a grant from Microsoft, and they're looking to do computer training, and they will take on the WIA participants. So they will, again, be partnering with, the Opportunity Act participants for service delivery. So what I strongly just want to suggest in my last, I'm up, but can I go over? What I really suggest is that you find out where your local area is, where your board is, when they meet, get to know your local board members, get to know your staff to the board. Each local area has a one-stop comprehensive center, which will have all the partners and activities in it, as well as affiliate sites. Get to know them. You'll find out that there's ways for you to get money, be a part of the entire system, and partner. Thank you. Sorry.
So thank you, panel. We've had the federal view down to the local view, lessons learned. Looking forward to some questions from all of you about federal partnerships and how they play out at the local level.
Hi there, Miguel Figueroa, and I'm from the American Library Association, and I believe strongly in partnerships, and I'm sorry to give this question to you because I think it's for you and the previous panel, but initiating partnerships I think is really easy, but increasingly as organizations are more niche and focused, managing partnerships can sometimes be really difficult. So I was wondering if you all had thoughts about how managing partnerships perhaps might be getting easier or how it might be getting more complex, especially as we move from national partnerships to local partnerships. And in light of the collective impact and other types of models that are great, but their execution can sometimes be a challenge, I think.
Absolutely. And collective impact is a whole approach that requires a lot of setup and work and time to really align everybody's agenda. So it's a great question, very fair question. Partnerships are just as much work at the federal level as they are at the local level, and I'm sure that's true at the state level too. So choose your partners wisely so that you can go the distance and really meet your long-term goals with people. Invite people to come on and join those long-term goals. But I would say limit the number of short-term projects that you're doing that aren't all driving towards your long-term strategic goals, or you will spend a lot of time in partnership nurturing. But I'll see what the panelists have to say about that as well. Jamie, do you want to take a crack at that?
I can. I don't know if you'll like the answer. My answer for Wyoming library directors is we have them call the state library when they have questions about potential partners. And our honest answer is always to get them to truly understand what the partner is asking them to do, and then what they can agree to. And if they can't agree, to come to some really true understanding, then not to go through with whatever the project is. And on the other hand, we tell them that they just have to hold fast. So if they really want to participate in a certain project because it's really of the needs of the community, but they can't do steps 4 through 8, then say you can do steps 1 and 2, and then that's it. And I'm sorry we can't help you collect the data at the end. But maybe in the end that'll have more impact than not doing the project at all.
Mm-hmm. Steve, do you want to?
I just offer the observation that what worked among the partnerships that we observed in BTOP work was having a common metric, but freedom to implement the way they needed to. And that has something to do with the way in which funding is offered and allowing the contributions of different partners to be visible. Doesn't solve all the problems, but that helped a lot.
Well, and this might not be really fair because it's the law, but I can say that from the Investment Act to the Opportunity Act, what we've seen is that it's more open. There's more partner buy-in, and each partner has a say, and everyone's working together, whether it's regulations or it's performance accountability, how the money's going to be spent. Everyone's at the table this time. In the Investment Act, there was only one entity, workforce, at the table, and yet all these other people were required. But nobody was really at the table being allowed. So I think what I see this time, even though it's law, is that there's more openness and true partnership in developing the whole service design, everything.
That's great. Thank you for that question. Are there other questions here or on Twitter?
Hi, Homo Nafisi, Hartford Public Library. I have a question from Heidi and Denise. A lot of people are graduating with their high school degrees and they're not ready to transition to college. They're using financial aid, as you know, for remedial courses. I think this is a wonderful area where our libraries can fill a big gap, and I wanted to hear from both of you if there's any direct funding to support us with some kind of program to help with the math, reading, and writing.
Ooh, that's a good one. You have an answer?
Well, I have an idea.
Partial ability to benefit?
The new change. Yeah.
It was just announced. The guidance for the ability to benefit Pell grant money from the Department of Education is one thing that I can put on the table from our department. It was rescinded, and after much successful advocacy, so thank you to all the advocates in the audience, it was restored partially to allow people who do not have a high school diploma to get some Pell money to help with early college courses if they show ability to benefit. So that guidance has just been released. It's quite complicated guidance, but hopefully going forward it will be more straightforward in how that gets released by community colleges and elsewhere to help students so they're not burning through.
Could I just make a postscript comment on that? Because that's something I've been looking into. For that partially restored ability to benefit criterion, the training will have to be sort of an on-ramp into a career pathway.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's going to require and hopefully strengthen local partnership requirements. And the other thing I wanted to add is, unlike funds appropriated to WIOA, which is what in my shop we call the New Opportunity Act.
Yeah, that just rolls right off your tongue, huh?
Yeah. The Pell Grant funds are they're printed more like money. Okay, it's not tied to a programmatic appropriation the way many other programs are. So the more people who can qualify for them, the more funding will be available to deliver the services to them. So it's not a fixed pie.
That's right.
That, if one party gets more funds to deliver services for, someone else is necessarily going to get less. So it's actually centered in the learner, in the adult. So.
And Career Pathways is a great place for us to talk about this group of learners who need on-ramps into education, on-ramps into employment. Denise, do you want to add about Career Pathways?
Well, if I heard you right, too, you said that they were a high school graduate but still basic skills deficient. And if once the final regulations come out for the Opportunity Act, if that follows the Workforce Investment Act, that youth would still be considered an out-of-school youth. So still eligible for a lot of the services, partnering, like if you do the Career Pathways with education, you could be partnering with the Opportunity Act for additional remedial services, supportive services, all the elements, and I believe there are up to 15 elements now of services and activities that are available to the youth. And Congress also took a look and said for the Opportunity Act, required 70% of the funds be spent on out-of-school youth. So even though a high school graduate, if they're still basic skills deficient, they're considered an out-of-school youth.
And does that age go up to 24?
Under the new law.
Yeah, so anyone who's 25 doesn't fit into that.
Correct. If they were 24 and 364 days, you've got them.
But then they're adult ed students.
Right, and then, but they could still be Pell Grant eligible if they didn't have a high school diploma and were 25 or older. It just would, so.
It would be also working with adults who have their high school diploma.
Correct.
Who have a dream to go to college.
Right, yep.
And they're 25 or 26.
So there are some new funding possibilities out there. And I think strong local, collaboration with a career pathway system would be really, really beneficial, to access some of those opportunities, even though I think all the mechanisms aren't in place yet.
But there's a lot of federal guidance on career pathways, and a renewed toolkit is coming out later this summer, so you can watch for that. That is the three agencies, Department of Ed, Department of Labor, and Department of HHS, Health and Human Services, put that together. I have time for one more.
I don't know that much. Susan McVeigh, State Library in Oklahoma. I don't know that much about the Investment Act, but I know that the Opportunity Act has also included adult learners or adult literacy organizations as eligible applicants. Is that something, Denise, that your agency and Heidi's agency are working on together, or what shape is that taking? Will they simply be an eligible and an applicant and apply to their local workforce? Is that the way it's looking?
Yeah, the responsibility in that role is back to the local workforce development area. So absolutely, to be a provider, you would be going through them.
And there's two ways to be a provider. One, you can be an eligible training provider to the Department of Labor system, or an eligible provider of adult education. And libraries have always been. So we are hoping that, that is renewed energy. And also housing authorities have always been, but we've lost a lot. So time to renew that energy around partnering with housing authorities and libraries. And I think we're at time. All right. Well, thank you again, panel.